Okay, we are recording. So first, a huge thank you to Canada Beef and Taste Canada for putting this together today. And I'm so happy to have Sandra and Ricky back with me. We had a chat a little bit earlier, well, towards the tail end of last year, and it was really, really great. And it was really inspirational and educational. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you both again today. So, let's kind of just start with maybe kind of an introduction of who you are. We'll start with Sandra and just kind of give a little bit about maybe kind of your background and what brought you into farming, because I know that both you and Ricky came from two very different backgrounds into this.
Thank you very much, Steven. It's great to be here with people today. And I must admit, as much as I'm beginning to hate Zoom, it does work really well when you're trying to get to different parts of Canada and the province. So I'm Sandra, and I've been farming for about 20 years. I own a small farm an hour outside of Toronto in Brantford, Brant County. And I wasn't a farmer. I helped on a farm when I was little, and I just dropped myself into farming with an opportunity to buy some land. And I just decided, well, I bought a farm. I guess I better go learn and be a farmer. So after lots of ups and downs, I'm a cow-calf beef farmer, and I raise my cattle on pasture and hay, and basically am a grass-led farm.
Awesome. Ricky?
I'm Ricky Seelhof. My husband and I and our 3 kids own and operate our ranch here near Williams Lake, BC. We run 500 mother cows. I was actually born and raised in farming, so it wasn't too much of a shocker to me what we do, but I chose to stay in the field because I absolutely love it.
So I'm very curious. I know that there's no typical day in farming, right? Every day is different. It varies by seasons, and you're probably thrown, countless obstacles, right? Like cold winter snaps, etc. So maybe, can you just kind of tell us, like, what's one of maybe your favorite days on the ranch that goes really well, and then again, kind of what are some of the maybe obstacles that you face as well? Ricky, maybe we'll start with you since I think you're still on my camera at least.
Oh, okay. So yeah, obviously everything changes from season to season. My favorite time or favorite season is calving season, so that's springtime. I just love getting to see those little baby calves be born, helping them if they need help, watching them run around and buck and kick and have fun. The most challenging time for us, I think, is just where we are. We live in a really wet area, so trying to make hay for the cows is definitely a challenge.
Sandra?
I think my very favorite time of the year, because we're in southern Ontario and often our winters are wet and mud, and I'm often calving in mud, and that's when I want to quit. The first day that I can turn the cows and the calves out into the grass, that it's finally grown enough that they can go and start eating fresh grass, that is one of the most profoundest satisfactions I feel as a farmer.
That's
Get them
awesome.
off of dry hay and out of the mud and onto green pasture.
So I guess it's good that Lauren volunteered to come help you at the farm later in the summer now. I think she chose the date correctly based on what you just said. So what is it that really kind of keeps you at it then, like year after year? You just kind of said one of the more rewarding experiences. Like, would you ever consider not farming? And, again, what kind of keeps you at it? We'll start with you, Sandra.
I think the fact that when you're farming, you're outdoors every day. And when I grew up in Toronto, our parents kicked us outside all day long to play. So actually being a farmer is like returning to my childhood. So I dress up like Robert Munch's Thomas the Snowman, and I go out and I play in the snow for 2 hours and check cows. And I think it's the fact that I'm outdoors and that I also know exactly what I've accomplished every day in my job, whether it's move one bale from the mow to the feeder, or whether it's to check a cow that might be calving. And I also see my efforts over time unfold so that whatever I choose to do on my farm, there is a direct impact down the road that I can say, yeah, that made a difference, or oops, better not do that again. I like that. I like seeing my progression.
Awesome. Ricky, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I totally 100% agree with Sandra. I like that you're kind of in charge of your own destiny per se. You're your own boss. You don't have to, if you don't want to work, you don't have to work, but there are days you have to work hard, but it's a rewarding work that you get. To say the first, skip in your step, my favorite is honestly when a baby calf is born. There's nothing more rewarding to me to see when a new life comes. That is a true blessing.
It's lovely. So I'm going to now kind of move the conversation over. So, you know, I started working with you and I found out about TESSA, which is the Environmental Stewardship Award, and you're both TESSA recipients. So congratulations on that. That's a huge achievement. And what I really love about TESSA is the fact that like it recognizes producers who go above and beyond the standard industry conservation practices and really set a positive example for other cattle producers and the general public. And, you know, one of the kind of key topics that's always thrown around, you know, we've been doing a lot of, you know, trends and looking at like what people are looking for as we kind of get into the future, especially with like millennials and Generation Z. And, you know, the word like sustainability comes up all the time. And that's kind of a really hot topic and something that's important to them. But with TESSA, what I really love, again, is it takes it a step further, and it's stewardship, right? So it goes beyond just sustainability, and it's taking care and responsibility for the resources that you're in charge of, and, you know, making the most out of those resources and not exploiting them and leaving things in great shape when you're done. So I just want to kind of touch on TESSA and both your practices, and you know, maybe just beginning with like, how did it feel to get like the award, and what does the award mean to you? Ricky, we'll start with you.
Okay. Getting the award was a true honor. I mean, we obviously never set out to get the award, I guess, per se. We just always knew that we had to take care of the land, and we have a lot of waterways here. Like we have 16 tributary creeks that are all fish bearing. So we knew to begin with that we had to make sure that the cattle weren't in there tramping those down, you know, and wrecking the habitat for the fish. And we know that cattle always coexist with different kind of species, I guess, like birds, wildlife, bears, wolves, that kind of thing. So you have to work with nature. So I just think that winning the award and being recognized for the work that we did was, I don't know, no words can really describe that.
How about you, Sandra?
First of all, I just want everyone to know that Ricky and her family won the overall Canadian TESSA award, and I won a provincial Ontario award. So Ricky's farm is pretty special to win all across Canada. I found it was an honor, and it's funny when you said something, Ricky. Lots of farmers would come to my farm. I have a cold water creek, and it has trout and a lot of different things in it. And they would say to me, why'd you fence off the creek? Why don't you just let the damn cattle drink out of the creek? Your life would be so much easier. And why do you worry about that kind of stuff? And I wasn't smart enough to come up with a really good answer back then. But now I believe that the stewardship is way more than sustainability. I've always felt that the land is just lent to me. It's not my land. And my role is to take care of that land and to listen and watch what the land is telling me and act appropriately. And I can do that because it's only 80 acres.
So on that topic, I'm very curious because, you know, I've been reading a lot about, obviously, like just the land and the regeneration of the land by having cattle on there. And I believe, Sandra, like if I'm not mistaken, your land when you first purchased it wasn't quite what it is now, and you've seen sort of that evolution, right? Can you talk maybe a little bit more about that and how you've seen kind of the ecosystem rebuild?
Yeah, when I bought the land, it had been in my uncle's family, but he had rented it out to different farmers, and they're called cash croppers. So they come in every year and they might plow up the land, they might cultivate the land, and they put in corn, beans, soybeans, or wheat usually. And depending on who the renter was, sometimes you don't feel the obligation to take care of the land as much as when you own it. So when I came to the land, there was lots of soil erosion on the hills. They were cropping where the hills were really steep, and so a lot of the topsoil would run down to the bottom, and they cropped to the creek, so there was no shade for the fish in the creek, and the creek widened and got warmer, and that affected things. And they wanted to clear a lot of the bush and stuff to get every acre, and in farming land, you need every acre to justify the cost of the equipment and everything. But so when I took it over, I heard that putting it into hay, which is like perennial grasses, was one of the best way to start healing the land. So that's the first thing I did. And then to see the change over the 20 years, I don't have erosion anymore. I don't have gullies, and I have a lot more interesting species growing on the farm because I've let the natural parts of the farm unfold to see what they could bring forth.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Ricky, how about you? Because I mean, I know that you moved from Saskatchewan over to BC, correct? And you have obviously much larger land to work with, but have you sort of seen changes as well over the years with your practices?
For sure. I mean, I think there's a misconception about cattle and grazing. You can really utilize your cattle for grazing to make your land better and healthier and grow more forage. Like say, for example, right now we're winter feeding. So we feed our cattle on different spots in our fields where we feel that it needs more organic matter on those fields. So the cows are, you know, they're walking around with their hooves and then they poop on that land. Then they're grazing and kind of churning the land, not exposing dirt per se, but all the organic matter, and that's putting it back into the land. So we have lots of land here that was not, it wouldn't grow hay, wouldn't grow grass, and we just even bale graze. So that means to set bales out and let the cows eat them. And then whatever spare hay is left that the cows didn't eat, we go in the springtime and kind of harrow it all out. So it has a good layer of that organic matter that helps hold, when it rains, it holds the water. And another thing with grass is it's a good carbon sequestering. So that is what I've really noticed at our ranch.
Cool. And what
If
about
that makes sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, again, it's been really kind of fascinating reading some of the information that's been provided, and obviously like the studies that are now going into this and what we're learning, which I think is great. And what about like just like the environment, right? Like, so how much does the environment have an effect in what you do, and like how do you manage with what nature gives you?
It was funny. I was thinking the other day about people on social media who are called influencers, and there's probably all kinds of them out there in the world, and they're making a lot more money than I do. So I thought, you know, I have 3 influencers, maybe 4. My influence, and the best influencers I have and pay attention to are the sun, the rain, the grass growing, and the soil health. And those 4 influencers can make a difference on my farm and whether I make or break it at the end of the year. And the environment, you know, as Ricky said, you look at your land and you think, how can I improve it? Because we want to keep the rain on the land. We don't want it running off like parking lots. And we want the cows to figure out where the best, sweetest forages and grasses are, which they will go to the first time, every time you put them in a new field. And when you see more and more of that happening, and you see more butterflies coming back and bees, and you see spider webs all through the grass, you know that microbiology is working, not just on top of the grass, but below the grass. And then when the different birds come in and the animals, my philosophy is you let them be, and they'll sort themselves out, the predators and the hawks and the coyotes, and just leave my cows alone and you can stay, I tell them. So I give them a little lecture every beginning in the spring. I'll keep the hunters away if you stay away from my cows.
Yeah.
Ricky, how about you?
Well, I think like I agree with what Sandra says. She said it exactly. And just with ranching, just the cost, the cost to run a ranch or a farm, I think that we need to step back and look what nature has given us and work with nature and think of different ways we can utilize those things that we are given instead of, I don't want to bash farmers in any way, but, instead of ripping up land every year where we can use cows or, they're coming out with new seeds that you feed your cows like grain, they'll eat it. And then the seeds live in their tummy just the way that a rumen animal works. And they go out and poop and spread that seed for you. I mean, you're saving fuel in a sense as well. So there's lots of different ways we can use our animals and our land.
So I think that's a really good segue. Both of you actually talking about kind of influencers and other farming practices as well. So like now, again, I'm going to kind of tie it back to being like a Tesla award winner. Like, do you feel that like once you have won that now there's a certain kind of like obligation, or what are your responsibilities? And does it continue like beyond the year that you win? And, how does that affect other farmers as well?
Oh, for sure. I don't know about Ricky, but I have this tremendous sense of obligation that every year I have to work towards minimizing disturbing the land as much as I can. And it's really funny because some of the guys will come on and I have thistles on my farm. And I know that's because maybe the cattle, there was too much compaction or something that is out of balance. And everyone says, well, just go and spray them and get rid of them. And I'm just horrified at the thought, which is really stupid. But if I go and just spray those thistles, then what's the impact on the rest of it? And then what happens to all those? I have a whole whack of yellow finches that come to the farm every fall, and there's 50 of them. And what do they love? They love the seeds of the different thistle plants. So every year you think, okay, what more can I do to minimize having to use a tractor, to having to disturb the land? And also as a farmer, we're so cheap, us beef farmers, because we don't have milk checks coming in. We're trying to save every penny we can and work smart.
Ricky, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, and I think we obviously do have an obligation. And it changes, especially for us where we are, it changes year to year, like looking at, because we've been dealing with lots of floods lately. So how we can step back and look at that and what we can do to help lessen the flood happening or change different things. So I think there's always that obligation there as a farmer and rancher, and that's just how you think if you want to be successful and take care of your land.
So now what changes, like, have you seen changes overall, maybe like in the industry as well, or sort of like a progression in how cattle's raised and habitat conservation? Like obviously you're, on one end of that spectrum, but like, do you see that it's sort of starting to shift a little bit more in that direction?
Yeah, I think so. When I mentioned the words grass farming and grass-fed, people looked at me as if I had 12 heads and told me it was impossible to do. And it was impossible to do with what I was working when I started. But there's a shift now, and people are realizing they went from what they called zero grazing days, where all cows were kept in the barn, to now realizing that there's a lot less fuel usage. There's recycling of the nutrients back onto the land if you can use the cattle in the cycle. And when you think about it, when people say, oh, cattle use so much water, well, yeah, they might drink a lot, but also they're peeing it right back into that farm. And so everything is one big circle. And so people are watching that and they're realizing that they could probably save on inputs and fertilizer if they incorporated more livestock into using up their crops and leftover food. We feed, lots of beef farmers will feed carrot peelings and potatoes and all the waste that comes out of food processing. Sometimes they'll mix it into different rations into the different feedlots. And so that's really good to see that people are trying to look at recycling stuff that would otherwise be totally wasted.
Ricky, is there anything?
Yeah, and I honestly think that, I think that the way of the future, that's the way that all of us farmers and ranchers are going to have to think if we want to have a future. And even if you live, in the city, downtown Vancouver, wherever you are, we all need to really think about how we can take care of that land, because there's only so much land made. It's not like it's made every day. And it's the only way to heal the earth is to keep it in its most natural state.
So now, how do you see, like, we have obviously, chefs and student chefs and the kind of future of the culinary industry here. Like, how do you want to see the sort of relationship evolve, right? Like between farmers and chefs. Do you feel that right now there is a disconnect? And I'm also curious here, like for the people that are in the meeting, maybe you can even take it to chat. Like, have you visited a local farm? I'd love to learn a little bit more about, like, have you, if you have, has it changed the way that you've looked at things? If not, why have you not, right? Is it like a disconnect that you feel that you can't reach out to the farmers? So I kind of want this to become a little bit more of a sort of open chat. So I'd love everybody's feedback if you are willing to kind of throw it into chat. But we'll start with Sandra and Ricky. And again, on your end, maybe like, what would you like to see more?
This is really helpful because we can't have everybody coming to our farms. And I always believe in a balancing act between everyone's passions and pet theories and what's the best to eat and how to prepare it. That I only ask that we have some sense of sharing that plate with whatever the current trend is of the time, and not writing off different sectors of food production as being awful until you can actually have a conversation or come and see how things are. When I was a kid, I'm the last generation where kids were sent down to help their relatives on the farm. There isn't relatives on the farm anymore to help. So my kids never got sent down on the farm, and certainly their kids. I sometimes feel we're going to be in a zoo one day, eh, Ricky? Because there's 2% of us is the population. But I would really like to hear from the students actually about the disconnect, and it's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just, I'm just curious,
For sure.
Ricky, did you want to add? I know there was a little bit of a lag, so I'm always just waiting in case you want, if there was anything you wanted to throw in.
I do agree to be perfectly honest with you, I never even crossed my mind about, getting a connection with the chefs. I always think about trying to connect with the consumer, but a chef is obviously a very important role because they're preparing that protein product that we're raising. And I think as a rancher, I know I'm guilty for living in my own bubble and just worrying about what I see as a problem. So this kind of thing to me is so great to have, and for them to reach out and ask us questions right from the people who raise it.
So Ricky, we do have a question too. Sandra already responded to it in the chat. With Sandra, you have more limited supply, so you're local direct to customers. But what about you, Ricky? Like, what's your target market? Is it local food service, public?
So just because we are a little bit of a bigger operation, we sell our calves to a feedlot. We do some personal selling to local people, but we're not direct to to a local market.
Yeah, so I'd also just, again, like to maybe like on the chat, if you guys do have any kind of questions, or again, to kind of tackle Sandra's question about like, is there kind of a disconnect? Like, because, I know one of the things that we did, we started doing more and more influencer tours, Sandra. So we've been visiting kind of local farms and working with different producers. And I mean, I can honestly say that, it's life altering for so many people. Like even, visiting an asparagus farm that we did, people 5 years later that still talk about it. I know the impact that I had being able to visit Sandra's farm. Like that's something that will resonate with me, and I'll never look at things the same, right? Because of that connection that we formed and that ability to actually see it like firsthand. So, again, on the chef side, like I'm very curious, to kind of get any feedback on your end. And again, things that maybe you would like to see happen a little more, connections that can be made. There was just a question from Zoe as well. Do you guys get a lot of orders outside of your area?
No, I don't.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, and Sandra,
Mostly I've built a word of mouth customer base. I do have customers in Toronto, and I'm a horrible marketer, and I don't want my meat marketed because, my God, I put people on a list and sometimes they have to wait. So, and I'm a lazy beef farmer, so I don't want to run out and raise another 100 cows and rent land for $300 an acre. So, yeah. Sorry.
If I may, Sandra and Ricky, could you expand more, like a corn-fed versus grass-fed, right? I think, and I don't think young chefs are very educated when it comes to that, and we're used to the kind of a corn-fed, beef mainly. I think, and the grass-fed is slowly, getting some traction. I think, could you expand on it? And like the first thing from, you're a consumer as well. You are a grower, you're a farmer. So why one or the other?
Okay, I'll take that first. So the reason I shifted into the grass-based farming and the grass-based beef was because I'm a very, very small farm. To buy equipment to grow crops and corn and harvest that, like, we're talking an awful lot of money. And I wasn't prepared to put out $500,000 just to buy used equipment to maybe, harvest 30 acres of corn one year and wheat. So I looked at it from a efficient, practical point of view of what can I do. And I have a nursing background. And so I've always believed that good food comes from good soil. And the best way to get good soil is to have cattle. And cattle are quite healthy if you can come up with a good balance system. So the grass-fed, there is a way of doing it, and everyone will say they do it a certain way, and they'll just finish on grass and still feed them grain. And the corn-fed product has been amazing here in Ontario because it does provide some consistency in the beef. So if you like your beef more a little bit, they call it maybe a bit sweeter, it might be a bit more tenderer on some of the cuts, and it might have some more fat in it, then that's one eating experience. And in terms of, is it bad for the environment? Basically, how we raise all beef in Canada is pretty high quality and pretty safe, and we all have to follow certain standards. The grass-fed is for a lot of people who want absolutely, they feel that fat is better if it comes from the grass because there's more omega-3 in it. People buy my meat, maybe not so much because of the taste, but they appreciate a farmer who's trying to give other critters of the world a chance to live and coexist. So, and I always say to people when they look for grass-fed, I always tell them they should ask the farmer if they're truly grass-fed and hay-fed, or do they finish them the last 6 weeks to give them that extra fat and a little bit of extra marbling. And that's fair game, but just know that some people are truthful about what they do and some people like to be vague about what they do.
Ricky,
and
do you have
yours
that?
out west, Ricky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I
you
think it
sell
comes down
yours.
to, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sandra.
No, I was gonna. What do they finish them off in BC? I know they use barley in Alberta. What are they in the feedlots? What are they finishing them with?
Well, BC, we don't finish cattle here. Most of them go, there's a few feedlots here, but everything goes to Alberta, Saskatchewan, or lots to Washington.
Oh, okay.
So we don't see as much finished cattle here. So that one's a little bit more difficult to give a true answer. But say if we're raising for our own, the animals, they eat hay, grass most of their life. And then, like you said, Sandra, the last 6 weeks is when we put them on grain just to get that nice fat cover to finish the meat properly and for the taste.
Mm-hmm.
So Sandra, I'm curious too, and I don't know if this is still happening, but I know, when we talk about terroir and we're talking about flavor, right? Was there not some biomarker work being done with the University of Guelph, I believe?
Yeah,
right?
and Beef Farmers of Ontario. So they were looking down the road to try to come up with some biomarker on Ontario fed beef, so that I think part of it was so that people couldn't pretend they were selling Ontario beef and scamming and frauding customers. So they asked a bunch of us farmers to send in a steak if we had a processed animal, and they would look for certain markers. And they did decide that there was a different marker for Ontario raised beef. And it does go back to the soil and the type of forages you have. So my farm has heavier soil. It's got more minerals in it. And also I grow certain grasses and clovers and alfalfas and weeds that have a sugar content in them. So just like a winery that talks about terroir with their wines and their grapes, I take my little Brix meter out and I go and I squish grass at certain times of the year and hold it up to the sun and hope like heck it's getting sweeter every year. So I guess if it's too sweet, I'm going to have diabetic cows. Then I'll have to go and give them insulin. So yeah. And so wherever the animal's raised, there can be a distinct different flavor in the meat.
Yeah, and I always thought that was, I mean, you know, and you see that in everything, you know, like, so now we're gonna have to start implementing a beef tasting, right? Where we can taste different beefs and like see if you can kind of pick it up. Maybe there'll be like a sommelier for beef at some point in the future.
You need to hire Joyce with her 3 barbecues and 20 steaks.
I think so. I think so. So we're going to open it up to sort of a Q&A, but I just want to kind of tackle maybe like one last question, right? And it's, you know, again, tackling back like information. How is information shared? And I love doing these because I love being able to chat with you and get information directly from you. But again, from like the students and chefs here, like, you know, I'm very curious as to like, where do you get your information? How in detail do you go? Like, you know, how is it easier and better to share information with you so that we're making informed decisions? Because I know that, you know, information is key. So I'd love to kind of open up that conversation. And again, you know, even from like a farmer's perspective, like with Sandra, Ricky, if you guys want to, and maybe like Chef Steve or some of the students, like I'm very curious to see how much you kind of inform yourselves and how important that is in the decisions you make.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in as an instructor because I'm teaching about like a beef production, you know, like I saying, not class, but saying on one course about lecture, about 2 hours in the second semester students. And what I teach them, I use all spectrum. So you won't like that, but saying I'm anything from the, you know, like I was saying, the beef producer of Ontario, of Canada to PETA and anything in between. You know, like I was saying, and you know, so I have a bunch of websites or whatever, a bunch of articles, and I throw everything on the students and I saying, okay, and it's all over the place, of course, like it depends who you ask. And I even have, like I was saying, you know, the dietitian of Canada as well there. So I was saying, and then ask the students, so how come, you know, we could ask one question, and I give you an example. There's always a stigma about red meat, and I love beef, okay? I don't have an opinion. I'm kind of, I love beef myself, but the stigma of red meat, is it good? It's not good for you, and so on. And I have about 15 different sources, and I pretty much let them loose, and I'm saying, and they come with 15 different answers, pretty much. Mm-hmm. So that we, you know, and that's where we have a discussion where there's right and wrong, but I think, where do you find the valid information? Right? I think, you know, like I think, because of course, if you're a producer, you're going to advocate for your product. And no offense to, you know, to any of you, the same way I will advocate for my college and for my industry. And if you are like someone like an organization like PETA, you're going to be all of the, like I was saying, at the other side of it. Mm-hmm. So I just, you know, educate the students to find more valid sources. You know, like I was saying, you know, go on the CBC, do some media we're supposed to be middle of the road, who, you know, check the resources, check the reference, as, you know, like the dietitian of Canada, I think they're very good and very fair. I think even when it comes to red meat, like I think, you know, like I think if you go on the dietitian.ca website, they're quite relatively fair and open for people, like I think, you know, receptive for people to eat beef and pork, you know, some of the red meat. So that's the way kind of I teach, and I let, you know, I don't tell my students how to think. Mm-hmm. I tell them to do the research, check the reference, and who is talking about what, pretty much. So I'm going to let the students jump in right now. So
good.
Anyone, feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to jump in. I'd love to get your insight.
So, you know, if they are quiet for now, I'm going to ask you, I think, you know, like I think, you know, as young chefs, like they are going to be asked, sometimes they'll be confronted by customers are saying, like I keep hearing that the stigma around health concern around red meat. So how should they tackle that? Like from your perspective, and I'm sure you hear it as well from a farmer's perspective. I think the stigma around red meat. How would you explain that?
I wish you'd take this, Joyce.
Joyce, yeah. This is, I think, a good chance for Joyce to jump in.
Yeah. So I'm with Canada Beef, and I do work on the nutrition portfolio, that area. We do work hard to keep up to date with the current research, and we basically make a pledge to be truthful and honest and dig out the Canadian perspective on things. Sometimes a lot of what the data you'll look at will be maybe a global number, and we're trying to make sure that people take into consideration what your whole diet looks like, for one thing, and also what does the Canadian diet look like. So Health Canada will take a look at a survey that they call the Canadian Community Health Survey, and they look at all the data that is provided there to get a snapshot of what Canadians are eating. And Heart and Stroke looks at similar data. And this is Stats Canada data where they ask people on one given day, sort of what did your diet look like? And that is what they use actually to develop the food guide. They take a look at that and see people's eating patterns. So some of the work we've done to understand the Canadian context around red meat was we went to Stats Canada, and you do have to pay them to do the extra work to mine out exactly, how much red meat are people eating. And we have quite a few papers and articles written on thinkbeef.ca if you want to go there to check out the nutrition information. We have the facts there about all the claims that can be made about beef. And these claims are regulated claims by CFIA and Health Canada. They regulate what you can or can't say about your nutrient content. So we have that kind of information there. We look at the Canadian nutrient file data, and we've found some pretty remarkable facts about beef based on that Canadian context, that out of, say you have 21 meals in a week, out of those, only 2 of those are going to be beef meals. And we're talking about 100-gram servings. So that's just the size of the palm of your hand. So from that information, we can, rightfully say that Canadians really aren't eating too much red meat. And we also looked at the calorie content and makeup of what red meat contributes. It's 5% of our calories are coming from red meat, and that's beef and pork and lamb. And 9% of saturated fat comes from fresh red meat, and 7% of fat. So, if you're looking at it because of fat concerns, or you think we're eating too much, I think it's a bit of an urban myth when you look at the facts. We are part of the food guide Eat Well plate. We're well represented there in the protein category. And we certainly agree with Health Canada's recommendation to eat a variety of proteins, because plant protein sources and animal protein sources offer different nutrient packages, and they have their own place on the plate for sure. We don't have fiber, for example. We're not a great source of fiber in meat, but we are animal food sources are the only source of vitamin B12, for example. So you really shouldn't be doing one or the other. The encouragement is eat a variety of protein sources. Always, I think what's really important for chefs to keep in mind, and this is the last thing I'll say because I'm not yakking too much, is it's really, I think that one thing the COVID pandemic has taught us is that, to slow down, appreciate your food, and how important it is to know how to cook for your own sort of resilience in your household. Learn how to use leftovers properly so you don't waste food. Try to embrace enjoying being in the kitchen and cooking. It was a great Globe and Mail article about how it was an opinion piece about how the fellow is finally sat down and is not being so rushed and understanding what it takes to put a meal on the table, you know, and that's an important role that you as young chefs could easily take up, because it's whole foods we really need to be putting more of in our diet. And 50% of our calories are coming from ultra processed foods. So if there's a place where we could all learn to live better, it would be to maybe return back to some of our foundational foods and learn to cook. Okay, I'll stop.
That was all very well said.
I hope that's helpful.
I just want to applaud you for, you know, like I say, again, we talk about sources. You mentioned Health Canada, you mentioned the CFIA, and you mentioned processed food. And I think that's a very strong message that I encourage my students to remember. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And like I said, we do have that sort of captured. If you want to take a look at thinkbeef.ca, we do work hard to be balanced. We just believe and understand and appreciate that beef has a role to play. It's a unique food package in itself. So that's really our only message, that it matters and that it has a place on the plate. Not the best, it's not the only, but it certainly has a place.
Well, I'm going to give it a shout out from Cook the Books, because I think, you know what, a beef dish was both the 2019 and 2020 champion, right? So you know what, it's got a good place on the plate for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. That was a great question, Chef. Yeah. And thank you, Joyce, for addressing that. So students, again, I just want to kind of leave it open. If you do have any questions, feel free to ask. And if not, you know what, we'll kind of wrap it up. But this is your opportunity. You know what, a lot of great sources of knowledge here today. And, you know, we're happy to share information with you.
Instead of being shy, I have one more question. That's saying, you know, to our beef farmers, because you're the reason why we have a job. I saying, you know, like I think you provide us with, you know, with nature's bounty. That's how I look at it. So what's your favorite beef dish to eat, and why?
Good question.
Oh, Ricky, what did we say in the fall? I think it's changed.
Sorry, did you say in the morning?
No, last fall when we were on the panel, they asked us that. And
I know, but no, what did Steve? Sorry, I didn't quite catch the end of what Steve said.
Your favorite beef dish to eat? To cook and eat. Okay. Best cut or best dish or whatever you like to eat from beef.
I know.
I vary, but right now I just love my slow cooked braising ribs. Or short ribs, whatever you guys are calling it now. What are you calling them now? Do you call them braising ribs, Steve, or are they called short ribs now?
Short ribs mainly, I think. That's what seems to be quite popular. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to tell my butcher to stamp that instead of braising ribs.
Hands down, my favorite.
What was that, Ricky?
I said hands down, my favorite is always a good old T-bone steak.
Joyce, how about you? You have to jump in on this one too.
Oh, I was going to say beef bourguignon. And it's almost Valentine's Day. So like beef bourguignon is a very good one for Valentine's Day.
Lovely. Chef Steve, what about you? I want yours too.
You know, it's a very good point where I won't make too many friends, but I do believe if you have a steak, the farmer deserves all the credit, because it's not too much skill to cook a steak, because all the work is done for you. Where I rather have, like I think, you know, like a tougher cut of beef that you know, which is going to be a bit tougher to start with when the cook has to apply some skills and knowledge into it. So I think you know, so I would like anything like somewhere in the shoulder, in the neck, and just like a slow braise or something. I think, you know, like the belly part of the beef. I think being European, I think what I really enjoy, and I can't see it here because it's not popular, like we boil the belly part of the beef, we just simmer it with some vegetable, and you know, with some vegetable, and it's just, so the meat is great because it's not braised, it's just slow boiled until it's tender, and then we eat that like pretty much other chunky soup with some vinaigrette or even mayonnaise. So it's very European, but I don't think too many people will go for that.
Is that the flank steak you're talking about from the
Yeah,
belly?
like I think the belly. I think most likely in the
Yeah.
flank. I think like I forget. I have the French word. I forget the English word. But most likely when you have about a 20% fat content, like I think, and it's simmered for pretty much a half day. I think with vegetable, with leek, carrots, celery, onions, and herbs. And I think pretty much and you eat that with a vegetable. And actually, I used to know an Italian family, then they take the broth and make a fantastic risotto out of it after. So.
Wow.
Well, it sounds like you should come to my house.
I was just gonna say,
I haven't been west yet, so I think I'm open to the invitation. It's I have been, like I think I've been to Ontario and east, but I think I'm still due to go west. So I will knock at your door. Don't be surprised.
Steve, you have a whole panel that's
my
ready to
door is
try
always
that.
open.
So awesome, awesome.
I would just like to say I'm just so glad that there's still schools where people can go and learn to be chefs. And chefs and farmers, we have a lot of similarities. We like to create, we like to work on our own. We have incredibly high pressure days where we just agonize whether we're going to make it through. Or for us, it's rain. For you, if you get what you need to produce your food. But there's a lot of commonalities between chef and farmers, and I like that link. And I've always believed that it doesn't matter what you do in life, if you bring some kind of passion to it and you profoundly believe in what you're doing, that's wonderful.
Totally.
Those are some, great closing words, which I was just actually going to ask for, but you beat me to it. So you know what, Ricky,
Sorry.
you know what, that came even more natural. It's even better, right? Ricky, and we're going to leave it with you. Maybe just like a final thought that you want to.
Before you finish off, Stephen, if I may say a few words.
Of course.
This is Karen Baxter to all the students and Chef Steve. I'm with Taste Canada. I had the privilege of visiting Sandra's farm. And it was a beautiful afternoon. Joyce and Steven were there as well. And it really took me by surprise, the passion and the involvement with the whole operation. Sandra said she's a lazy farmer, and my jaw just dropped, and I'm thinking, wow, if this woman considers herself lazy, what am I? She works extremely hard and she loves her animals. And it was just a real role model to me on, she walks the talks. She really cares for the environment, for the animals, and is really an example on farming practices. So kudos to both of you, Sandra and Ricky, for being so passionate about your operations. And I hope the students can take some inspiration from this conversation, take it to the next level, and hear the words balance. Balance your diets, balance your research, look into everything. Don't take just one source of information when you're making a decision. Talk to the real people in the field to hear their perspectives and incorporate them into your decision making. It's very amazing. And the similarities between chefs and farmers is that they're both extremely hardworking. And extremely passionate. So I'll just leave you with this, and I'll be quiet now. Joyce, thank you for supporting this conversation, and Stephen, wonderful job again moderating this panel. And to both you farmer ladies, hats off to you. Best of luck. I hope our paths cross again very soon.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
Karen, that was lovely.
If I may as well, on behalf of my colleague, I think Steve Benz, who asked me to replace me in the last minute, I would like to thank you as well for organizing that. I know we have a few students show up, but I think we'll share the recording to all the students we have. And I think on behalf of all the chefs and future chefs as well, I want to thank our farmer, because you are, like I think, with nothing without you, and you work with nature. and we just pretty much do all the hard work, and we just provide the finishing touch. And we're thankful for your hard work. And I agree, we need to reconnect with the farming community and be, you know, like I think we have too many middle people right now. And I think we need to talk to our farmers, I think, you know, and I couldn't agree more for that. And one more thought, Sabrina, if you could email me or Steve Benz, maybe the contact of everyone on the panel, because I think I like to, for the network purposes, because I wouldn't be surprised if I reach out to them at some point for some expertise or guest speaker appearance and so on, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Absolutely, no problem, my pleasure. And since we're all saying thank you, I also want to say thank you to everybody, to Chef Steve and Chef Steve, my Steves. I appreciate everything you've done this year, coming in to Cooks the Books and welcoming us to talk to the students in real time, and later sharing the video. I think it's fabulous, some really great conversations. And of course to Sandra and Ricky for your time and sharing all of your expertise with us. We really, really appreciate it. So thank you to everybody, and to the students for being here. And yeah, again, I echo the dig for the information. Don't trust one place, you know, really, you know, be critical thinkers. You know, as a chef myself and an instructor, I always kind of taught that to my students too, is really think about where your information is coming from. And as chefs, you have a great deal of influence on our communities and our culture. So take that and be responsible, and you know, and use that with pride. And yeah, so you know, it's a lot of great conversation here. I really liked the part about letting the environment kind of do its thing, and you're there to, you know, just work with it and not overpower it. I thought that was really powerful. So thank you to both of you again, and to everybody for being here. And yes, Chef Steve, I will pass on that information, no problem.
Ricky, did you have any last words after all of that?
Well, I think most of it got said, but I just think the most important thing that, you know, I teach my children, and I think that we can all step back, especially with COVID, that, you know, life is really a balancing act, whether we're ranching, farming, cooking, COVID, it's all a balancing act. And I think we need to just remember that getting back to our roots is really important, of cooking and sitting down at the table and visiting with your family, and just engaging in those little connections in life that are the ones that truly matter.
That's awesome. And so, you know what, I guess I'll just wrap it up. I think Karen, you took some of my thunder, because you said like a lot of what I wanted to say, and you said it so well. So you know what, but no, you know, I come from this from an outside perspective, right? So like I'm, you know, in the event space and in the media world, and, you know, knowledge is power, right? And the more I learn, the more I educate myself. You never look at the world in the same way. And so I have to say, like, a real heartfelt thank you always to Sandra, Ricky, Canada Beef, everybody, for educating me, for allowing me access into your worlds and to experience it, because then, you know, it just gets passed along. Everyone I talk to, I share those stories. So we all have to step outside of our bubbles. We all have to educate ourselves. We have to learn, and, you know, and we're so interconnected, right? And so there's no reason to not do that. So, you know, definitely knowledge is power, stick to it. And, you know, a big thank you to everyone for being involved here today, and for listening, and for sharing all this information.
For sure. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so everyone, again, you know, Sabrina can be the grand connector here, right? So if anybody does want to connect with anybody on the panel, etc., you know, Sabrina will be sort of our liaison to kind of connect everyone. So again, thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of the day and a lovely Valentine's and Family Day long weekend. With lots of beef on the table. Okay, just throwing it out there. Okay. All right, take care, everyone. All the best.
Thanks, Steven.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ricky and
Bye,
Sandra.
Ricky.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
luck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 See you. You too.